Let's look at the second one. Since this is not a 45-degree angle and we only have one of the sides, we're going to have to be a little more creative in how we find all the other angles and all the other sides. This will be a good time to start using the other trig relationships or ratios. So if I know that 28 is one of my angles, I also know that it's a right triangle because of the little square in the corner, then I can figure out what this angle is based off the fact that 90 plus 28 degrees is 118 degrees. So I'm missing one angle. If I take 180 degrees and subtract 118 from it, this angle right here, the missing one that we didn't know, is 62 degrees. Now let's find the sides. We have sine of 28 degrees, cosine of 28 degrees, tangent of 28 degrees, and then of course all the reciprocals. What I'm curious about is where I need to stand. Now remember, I need to stand where the angle is given. So here I am standing on the corner, and I am looking across the angle, splitting the difference, and I'm going to run into the opposite side. My longest side is the hypotenuse, and that means that the remaining side is the side I can walk along, which is the adjacent side. Since I know that, I can now figure out which trig ratio would be the most appropriate to find the opposite and hypotenuse lengths. If I go with sine, I would use opposite over hypotenuse, and that would not work because I don't know any of those values. I don't know opposite's length and I don't know hypotenuse's length. If I went with adjacent over hypotenuse, that would be more appropriate because I know that adjacent is 18. And I still don't know hypotenuse, but that's okay. Then I'm only left with one unknown. Now if I look at tangent, that's opposite over adjacent. And that one would work too because I don't know opposite, but I know adjacent. So it would be opposite over 18. So I could use either one of these, cosine of 28 degrees or tangent of 28 degrees, to find the unknown value. I'll go ahead and use tangent. Tangent of 28 degrees is going to equal opposite over 18. That means I'll multiply both sides to clear my fraction. 18 reduces out of the right side, and I'm left with 18 times the tangent of 28 degrees is equal to the opposite side. Now we can just put this in our calculator. Check mode first to make sure you're in degrees. We are indeed in degrees, so we are good to go. I'm going to take 18 and multiply it by tangent of 28 degrees. And we get 9.57. So the opposite side is 9.57. Now let's find the hypotenuse. It's a good idea to always use the values that are given, not the values that are calculated. If you use the values that are calculated, there's a very high chance that you will round incorrectly because we're already rounding 9.57 to 2 decimal places. So it would be better to pick this cosine of 28 degrees to find the hypotenuse because we're using 18, which was already given. Cosine of 28 degrees equals 18 divided by the hypotenuse. We want to clear the fraction, so we'll multiply both sides of the equation by the hypotenuse. So I have hypotenuse times the cosine of 28 degrees equals 18. Now remember, I want to solve for h, the hypotenuse's length, so I'm going to divide both sides by cosine of 28 degrees. That will give me h isolated on the left side, and I can cross out the cosine of 28, and I get h is equal to 18 divided by the cosine of 28 degrees, which will give me the actual value of the length of the hypotenuse. And we get a length of 20.39. And we can see that even though this triangle is not necessarily perfectly to scale, it makes sense that if we look at this side and it's 18, and we were to break it approximately in half, that does look fairly close to the 9.57 length. And the hypotenuse is showing to be 20.39, which does appear to be slightly longer than 18. So we have found all the sides and all the angles. In this last example, we want to take a look at this triangle with radian angles instead of degree angles. We're given one side, and again I'm going to draw myself standing at the angle, and this one's going to be interesting to draw because I'm going to have to lean over and try not to fall off my angle. Here's my 90-degree corner. I have pi over 3 here. I know that pi is equal to 180 degrees, and 180 degrees is how much all the three angles will add up to inside the triangle. So if pi over 3 is one angle, pi over 2 is the other angle, we have pi is equal to some unknown angle plus pi over 3 plus pi over 2. So the common denominator here would be a pi with a 6 in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply this first pi over 3 by 2 over 2, and the second pi over 2 by 3 over 3. That will get a common denominator, and I can see what angle I'm missing here. I need to figure out what that unknown angle is to get me a total of pi radians. That will give me 2 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6. So I have 5 pi over 6 total. That unknown angle has to give me a sum of pi. So if I have 2 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6, that's 5 pi over 6 that I've used up already, which means that the unknown angle has to be 1 pi over 6. So those are my other angles. This is clearly pi over 2 because it's the 90-degree angle. Now let's figure out what the other sides will be. So I'm standing here looking across my first angle given. That means that this side over here is the opposite side. I need to identify the longest side of the triangle, which is always opposite the 90 degrees. So my hypotenuse is 43.5. And that leaves me with the adjacent side, which is the side I can walk along, and that is unknown as well. I'm going to calculate my opposite and my adjacent using sine of pi over 3 cosine of pi over 3 or tangent of pi over 3, because this was the angle that was originally given. Remember that sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent, which means that I need to figure out which one I need to use. Let's say I want to find the adjacent side. If I'm given the hypotenuse, the most obvious one to use would be cosine of pi over 3. I'll have to solve for a, so I'll have cosine of pi over 3 equals a over 43.5. And I'll go ahead and multiply both sides of my equation by the 43.5 to clear the fraction. That will allow me to reduce the fraction on the right and isolate a. A is equal to this calculation, 43.5 multiplied to cosine of pi over 3. So I'll go ahead and convert my settings or my mode to radians. Calculate cosine of pi divided by 3. I'll hit enter and then multiply by 43.5. So my adjacent side is 21.75 units. And lastly, we need to figure out the opposite side. The best way to do that would be sine of pi over 3. Sine of pi over 3 equals opposite, which we don't know, over hypotenuse, which we do know, 43.5. Again, I'll clear my fraction by multiplying by 43.5 on both sides and reduce or clear the fraction on the right. So opposite is equal to 43.5 times sine of pi over 3. And we can calculate that. Sine of pi over 3 is 0.866, etc., multiplied to 43.5, which will give me an opposite side of 37.67 units. So that's my opposite side.